What heaven does when you forgive someone who hurt you. Heaven tore open. Padre Pio watched the spiritual realm split apart with power that shook him. Not gently, not gradually, with violence. A man had just spoken 3 words. Simple words. Quiet words. I forgive you. And all of heaven responded. The vision came to Padre Pio without warning. Not during Massachusetts. Not during prayer. It struck him in an ordinary moment, and the force of it drove him to his knees before he understood what he was witnessing. The vision opened. Padre Pio saw 2 men, one standing, one kneeling. The kneeling man was weeping, begging, his voice broken. Please, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. The standing man said nothing at first. His face showed the weight of what had been done to him. Years of pain, betrayal, loss. The wound was deep, still bleeding. The kneeling man had destroyed his life, stolen from him, lied about him, ruined his name, his family, his future. The damage was real, complete, irreversible. The standing man had every right to refuse, every reason to walk away. Justice was on his side. The law was on his side. Everyone would understand if he said no. But he didn't say no. He looked at the man who had destroyed him. He saw the tears, the genuine remorse, the brokenness. And he said quietly, I forgive you. That is when heaven exploded. Padre Pio watched chains shatter. Not physical chains, spiritual chains. Chains binding both men. Chains of bitterness, resentment, guilt, shame. They broke like glass. Angels descended like a flood. Not slowly, not carefully. They poured into the space between the 2 men. They surrounded them. They worked with desperate speed. One angel moved to the man who forgave. It touched his chest. The wound that had been bleeding for years began to close. Not slowly, immediately. The pain that had consumed him started to dissolve. Another angel moved to the man who was forgiven. It lifted him. Chains Padre Pio hadn't even noticed fell away. The man gasped. He could breathe again. A third angel moved between them, building something. A bridge where there had been only destruction, connection where there had been only separation. Heaven had responded to those 3 words as though they were the most powerful force in the universe. And perhaps they were. Padre Pio felt his own breath stop. He had heard people forgive before. He had heard the words spoken. But this response was different, more immediate, more total, more transforming. Why? What made this forgiveness different from all the others? The vision paused. Padre Pio waited. Heaven did not explain. It only continued to show. He saw another scene. Different people, different circumstances. A woman had been wronged, hurt deeply. The person who hurt her came asking forgiveness. But the woman forgave conditionally. I forgive you, but I'll never trust you again. I forgive you, but don't expect things to go back to normal. I forgive you, but you owe me. The spiritual realm barely stirred. A few angels came. They did minimal work. The chains loosened slightly but did not break. The wounds closed partially but still bled. The bridge started but did not complete. The woman felt better, lighter. She believed she had forgiven. She believed she had done the right thing. But heaven knew differently. Padre Pio looked closer. Both people had said, I forgive you. Both had spoken the words. To human ears, they sounded similar. But heaven heard deeper. The first man's forgiveness had been complete, total, unconditional. He had released everything. The debt, the anger, the right to justice. He had given it all away. The second woman's forgiveness had been partial, conditional, calculated. She had kept something back, a piece of the anger, a claim on future payment, a right to bring it up again. Heaven responds to complete forgiveness, not to partial release. Months later, something shocked Padre Pio. The angels hadn't left the first man. They were still there, still working, still healing. And what they did next revealed something most people never learn about forgiveness. The man who forgave faced his own crisis, completely unrelated. His business failed. His health collapsed. He lost everything that remained. But the angels moved. Opportunities appeared from nowhere. Strength came when his body should have failed. People helped him for reasons they couldn't explain. Provision arrived through impossible channels. The man never connected it to the day he forgave. He thought it was grace, mercy, fortune. But Padre Pio saw the truth. Heaven was still responding to that moment of complete forgiveness. The angels had never stopped working. That single act had opened something in the spiritual realm that continued to flow. Nothing moved for a long moment. Then the vision deepened. Padre Pio began to see the pattern heaven was revealing. The acts of forgiveness that summoned heaven's full response were not the easiest, not the quickest, not the most convenient. They were the most costly. The souls that brought heaven to immediate action were those whose forgiveness carried a specific quality. It was not about the words spoken. It was about the release. It was about letting go completely. These souls did not forgive to feel better. They forgave because forgiveness is right, and heaven cannot resist that. At first, Padre Pio saw only the outward act. Both people had forgiven. Both had spoken the words. But heaven saw what accompanied the forgiveness. The first man's forgiveness had been pure. No conditions. No reservations. No debts kept on record. He had released everything because holding it was destroying him, and the release would free both of them. The second woman's forgiveness had been strategic. She had forgiven enough to ease her conscience, but not enough to truly free the other person. She had kept weapons for future use. And heaven responds to motive, not to words alone. The vision paused again. Padre Pio felt heaven preparing to reveal something deeper. Not just what happened when people forgave, but why complete forgiveness unleashed such power. The silence stretched. His breathing slowed. Then the vision resumed, but differently now. Padre Pio saw that heaven does not respond to performances of forgiveness. Heaven responds to actual release. True forgiveness mirrors God's own forgiveness. Complete, total, forgetting. When someone forgives conditionally, they have not truly released. They are still holding the debt, still keeping score, still waiting for payment. But when someone forgives completely, they have released everything. The debt is cancelled, the record is erased, the offense is forgotten. And that kind of forgiveness moves all of heaven, because that is how God forgives. A soul that forgives completely has stopped being a creditor, stopped being a victim, stopped being controlled by the past. It simply releases because holding on is death, and that kind of freedom summons heaven's full power. Padre Pio understood now what made the difference. Forgiveness is not about the words, not about the feelings, not about looking merciful. It is about complete release. The soul lets go of everything: the right to justice, the right to revenge, the right to bring it up again, the right to make them pay. That release proves the forgiveness is real. He saw another example. A father whose son had destroyed the family, stolen, lied, disappeared. Years passed. The father's heart was stone. Then the son returned, broken, desperate, asking forgiveness. The father looked at him, saw the damage, saw the pain his son had caused. Every reason to refuse was valid, but he opened his arms. "You are my son. You are forgiven. Come home." No conditions, no probation, no payment plan, just complete restoration. Padre Pio watched heaven erupt. Angels surrounded that home. They began rebuilding what had been destroyed, not just in the son's life, in the father's life, in the entire family. Healing flowed like a river. Years of bitterness dissolved. The father felt joy he thought was dead forever. He never spoke of it again. He never told the son how much it had cost. He simply loved. But Padre Pio saw the angels. They remained for years. Every challenge the father faced, they handled. Every need he had, they met. The single act of complete forgiveness had opened heaven's storehouses over his entire life. The vision shifted once more. Padre Pio now saw something that disturbed him deeply. He saw people who had learned about this. They had learned that forgiveness brings blessing, and they began to perform forgiveness. Not from mercy, from calculation. They forgave quickly, easily, but they kept records. They remembered everything. They waited to see if the forgiveness would pay off. Heaven barely moved. Padre Pio watched one such person. A man who had heard that forgiving others brings God's favor. He wanted that favor, so he forgave everyone. But he kept a mental list. He tracked who owed him. He waited to see his reward. He measured his blessings against his forgiveness. His forgiveness was technically real. He spoke the words. He released some anger. But his heart was not. Heaven saw through it. The forgiveness was transaction. The release was incomplete. True forgiveness cannot be traded for blessing. The moment someone forgives to gain reward, it stops being forgiveness. It becomes investment. And heaven does not reward investments. Heaven responds to sacrifice. The vision began to fade. Padre Pio remained still. He would never teach this as a technique. He would never tell people to forgive in order to gain heaven's favor. But he would say quietly to those who came to him, when someone has hurt you deeply, and they ask forgiveness, give it completely. Not because they deserve it, not because you'll feel better, not because God will bless you, but because holding it will destroy you, because unforgiveness is poison, because you cannot carry that weight and live. Forgive totally, cancel the debt entirely, erase the record completely, release the right to bring it up again, not to manipulate God, but because it is the only way to be free. And watch what happens. Watch how heaven responds when you release what you had every right to hold. He sat in silence long after the vision ended. The room felt different now, lighter somehow. The truth remained with him, not as technique, but as reality. Heaven responds to complete forgiveness immediately. not because heaven rewards good behavior, but because complete forgiveness breaks chains. And when chains break, heaven can finally move. The kind of freedom that changes everything, the kind heaven has waited to give.